In general, the Eastern world has always been a target of oppression, whether it was due to their lack of industrialization, their resources, or just because they were thought of inferior because of their race, religion, or culture. In most cases, the indigenous people were treated as second-class citizens and forced to do the work for the oppressors. In some cases, however, they have been perpetrators of their own oppression.
In ancient times, China thrived. As one of the most powerful countries in the world, China was at the height of its power. Because of this, they thought themselves as superior to all other races and cultures and believed others to be barbarians.
Over in the Middle East around 711 CE, Muslims had conflicts with other religions. In India around the medieval age, Muslims and Hindus rivaled each other. During the medieval times, the Muslims destroyed Hindus' temples and created anti-Hindu practices.
The Indian caste system dates all the way back to 12,000 BCE. The religious background of the caste system can be found in the Rig Veda. One of the most famous sections states the Brahmin was his mouth, his two arms were made from the Rajanya, his thighs the Vaishya, from his feet the Sudra was born. In this section, the first man is created, thus giving rise to the caste system. In this system, there are 4 Varnas and a lower ranking called the Untouchables. Originally, this lower ranking did not even exist, but over time society created it. The Untouchables have low-class jobs and are often discriminated against, and are sometimes not let into temples to worship because they are considered impure.
From 1279 AD to 1368 AD, the Mongols occupied China. The Mongols founded the Yuan dynasty, which did not allow the Chinese to participate in the government. Instead, only Mongols and foreigners were allowed to take the government position. Although the government tolerated many religions, the Chinese suffered due to the language barrier and the different customs and backgrounds. In addition, the government oppressed the Chinese peasants with heavy taxing, which resulted in poor parts of China suffering. Many Chinese slaves died or fled from China because of the racial and cultural oppression that the Mongols were imposing.
During 1500 CE through 1700 CE, Islam was divided into 2 communities, the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims. The Shias believed that Muhammad had chosen Ali as his successor, and the Sunni Muslims recognized the 4 caliphs as the successor of the Prophet Muhammad. The Sunni and the Shia Muslims both competed for power and land. Eventually, Sunni Muslims succeeded in both gaining land and power.
A couple hundred years later in Africa, around 1600, Europeans and Americans alike began trading for or capturing African natives. During what was called the transatlantic slave trade, it was estimated that over 80,000 Africans crossed the Atlantic annually to spend the rest of their lives in chains. The captured people were forced into the cramped hulls of the large ships and sent to various places around the Atlantic Ocean. On the ships, the captured people were taken and treated like animals. Irish historian Robert Walsh, in Notices of Brazil in 1828 and 1829, described the space on the ship from the point of view of a slave as being so low that they sat between each other's legs and were stowed so close together that there was no possibility of changing their position by night or day. Because of their skin color, they were thought of as inhuman and were brutally treated both on the ship and once they reached their destination. On land, the Africans were sold off to the highest bidder and sent to work in awful conditions with no pay and bad housing. Slavery often involved people to be selected from the tribe and traded for items that the tribe needed. Occasionally, those chosen were criminals or prisoners from other tribes, which led to increased tribal conflict.
Similar to the slave trades, during imperialism, India was under British rule. The Indians were treated as the lowest class citizens in their own country. Religious oppression also took place under British rule. The Rowlatt Acts prevented public gatherings and made it possible for Indians to be imprisoned without trial. The British abused their power that was forcefully taken and took many resources that the Indians had. The British rose taxes and forced Indians to work for them. Fortunately, many people made a stand against British oppression, such as Gandhi. Gandhi sought a non-violent solution and made an effort to peacefully rebel against the British. Gandhi stated his opinion on his non-violent standpoint by saying, "But I can boldly declare and with certainty that so long as there is an even handful of men true to their pledge, there can only be one end to this struggle, and that is victory." In the end, Gandhi and his campaign successfully ended British rule in a non-violent and peaceful way.
After such great success towards oppression in India, the British turned to China.
Treaty of Nanking, the United Kingdom oppressed China, giving Europe millions of dollars, an economic and political control that gave them the ability to lower tariffs.
After losing so much power, the Chinese people were humiliated.
Following the oppression in China, the First Anglo-Afghan War was from 1839 through 1842 in Afghanistan. The British East Indian Company sent an army to gain and take away the power that the ruler of Afghan, Dost Muhammad, had. Britain wanted the land in order to protect the northern border of its Indian Empire. But eventually, the British army got destroyed. British and Indian troop survivors became prisoners of war. Between 1879 through 1888, the Soviet-Afghan War was fought, in which the fate of Afghanistan was gambled. Russia competed for Afghanistan's land in order to have access to the Indian Ocean, and eventually Afghanistan lost the war. Afterwards, the Afghans were treated no better under Russian rule. They were subjected to many cruelties, both religiously, economically, and politically.
During the rape of Nanking, the Japanese committed crimes such as burying people alive, burning them, using them for bayonet practice, and even decapitating them. In her diary on December 15, 1937, Minnie Vartan described the early effects of the rape of Nanking. The Japanese have looted widely yesterday and today, have destroyed schools, have killed citizens, and raped women. The Japanese committed these crimes due to their beliefs that the Chinese were inferior to the Japanese. In 1950, the Chinese army began to invade Tibet. Although the Chinese believed that they were liberating Tibet, the victims claimed that China was invading their country. As the Cultural Revolution started, China started to attempt to wipe out Tibetan religion and culture. Many monasteries were damaged and thousands of Buddhist monks were killed, tortured, or imprisoned. The Dalai Lama remarked that China has to go along with world trends. That's democracy, liberty, and individual freedom. China sooner or later has to go that way. It cannot go backwards. China's lack of respect is mostly due to old traditions when they believe that they were superior.
Even though the country has freedom of religion, many communities still attempt to kill the ones who convert to religions other than Islam. Many countries, such as the United States, have tried to step in and stop the oppression. However, for the most part, they have been unsuccessful.
Around 1979 in Cambodia, under Khmer Rouge's rule, many Cambodians were sent to collective farms. People who needed to wear glasses and light-skinned people were considered capitalists and killed. Around 2 million Cambodians died during the genocide, and the effect lasted long afterwards.
Today in India, the Muslim-Hindu conflict continues mainly due to a dispute over Kashmir, originating after the breakup of India under British rule. The Prince of Kashmir was Indian and Hindu, and believed he should rule, while most of the people living in Kashmir were Muslim and thought rule should go to Pakistan. The Kashmir conflict has caused much tension throughout India and Pakistan, as well as having an influence on Muslims and Hindus. More recently in Africa, religious oppression continues to plague numerous areas, specifically Nigeria, where various conflicts between two religious groups, Christians and Muslims, has caused much devastation, including death and injury and the destruction of communities. To tone down the violence and attempt to prevent further outbreaks, spokesman for the state governor, Kefas Sul, says the state governor has imposed a 24-hour curfew on Wukari, which is aimed at restoring normalcy in the town. The police will also continue to work to stop the internal oppression amongst the religious groups.
Although there is still lots of oppression seen in today's world, it seems that progress is being made for the future. More and more uprisings are beginning around the world in order to fight the oppression and bring lasting peace to a community or country. Even though oppression will always be present, we should strive for a perfect world in order to end oppression.